We are here because we are dedicated to helping the entire CrossFit community. Determined to elevate coaches, box owners, athletes, and everything in between, we believe that this mission will begin right here, right now. While this time and this goal begins with you, our hope is that you take this fire ignited within you and weave it into your own life with the same unrelenting passion to give those you have the privilege of coming in contact with the best hour of their day.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the best hour of their day. There's a lot of shit talking on yesterday's podcast about firing me. And yet, well, this is what happens when you talk about it on my back.
What happened is that once anyone who mattered got a hold of the information, they immediately vetoed it and we fired Ackerman instead.
Right, that's my point. That's what happens. If you guys don't watch Billions, you should. Listen, don't cross Bobby Axelrod. Is how this works. All right, you'll end up just not in a good spot. So, but anyway, Marcus is back with us. This week's been kind of a weird week for a lot of reasons, so the recordings are a little bit different, but all good. Marcus did a little intro of himself yesterday. I like to refer to him as the most interesting man in CrossFit that most people don't know, and that's not an insult. So
it's funny, he referred to himself as that too. He filled out the guest booking form, and that was his bio, the most interesting man in CrossFit.
There you go. It's true.
Yeah,
Your intro of yourself was very humble. So we'll get into that though. We'll dig in just a little bit deeper later. But did you guys miss me yesterday? Have you guys missed me all week?
Yeah, you made us do a show with just Ackerman.
I know, that's really terrible. I'm going to be honest with you guys.
Meetings.
I was listening to the podcast, and then right when everything was going well, and then he derailed it with the marriage questions, and I was like, I can't deal with this anymore. I'm out. I was like, just listen, ladies, listen up. Find you a man that loves you like Jason Ackerman loves himself, and you will live a long, happy life. It's just that's what you should be looking for when you judge your partner. So, anyway, end of the year is coming up. Marcus, how long ago did you have your affiliate? How long has it been since you've had your affiliate?
I sold it in 2017.
17? Oh, that's later than I thought.
Yeah.
I didn't. Oh, so you still had it when we met first?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. I thought you had sold it already. Okay.
Dude, I think you and I first spoke.
Like 2015,
yeah, it was like
I think?
Yeah, 2015.
I think it was like middle of the year 2015, maybe. I don't remember when. It was definitely 2015, though.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Would you care to talk about that?
Care to talk about what?
When we first met, if you even remember.
I do.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I wasn't the put-together gym owner that I am today.
No, it was. I believe the technical term is dumpster fire.
Dumpster fire? Shit show?
No. Yeah. No.
Drunk monkey?
You stood out to me from our very first conversation because
what was
of
that?
how
Hold on.
you.
Katie's face. I need to talk about Katie's. If you were not watching this on YouTube, I need to talk about Katie's face. When you said you stood out to me, Katie went, I'm like, what the fuck, Katie?
I was unintentional. I'm sorry.
Now we know how you really feel.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
very judgy.
Yeah, it was super judgy. You're like,
Well, that's why you should watch the video. So you see just real-time reactions.
Anyway, go ahead.
So, yeah, you when you reached out, you kind of came with your like heart in your hands where you're like, hey, man, like I've been doing this a while. I feel real confident about my product. We do a great job by people, but like something about what I'm doing is just not fucking working. And I'm ready to get some help. I resisted help long enough, and I'm ready for that now. And we just had a great conversation about, where you were at and specifically what the challenges were and what it is that you were wanting it to look like. And I just remembered getting off the call being like, yes, I love it when I get someone who is super passionate about the product, the people, what they're trying to do, and just haven't figured it out yet. Because those are the people that I know are going to be a rocket ship. right? It's the people who are at a point to where they're starting to be resentful towards people, or they're just looking for the silver bullet because I've been caring for long enough and I just need to make this shit work. Whatever variation of that, we can still help those people, and we'd still do that now. Our goal being to get them focused back on the thing that got them excited about it and the people. But, you were one of those people for me back then. And then we had our first coaching call together, and we refactored quite a few things. And from that point on, it was like we just kind of pulled the key log out, right? It was like all of a sudden things just started progressing really quickly for you with your box. And, you had so much knowledge already. And there were just a few, I think I remember referring to it as like a Frankenstein business model. It's like everything just kind of had been Legoed together based on best guesses, and like, hey man, that's this part I heard from here on this podcast. This part, it's just kind of how we've always done it. But once we just got a couple of things changed around, because you and your team were so hardworking and united, and the product was fantastic, it was just like, well, there you go. And I had
a pretty good team then, but it was still lacking. And that's not a shot at anybody. That's just where we were in that point of our of our evolution. But yeah, I remember that too. And then from there, I think revenue over the next like 18 months or something like that went up like 200%, something like that. But yeah, I was probably pretty standard gym with regard to revenue. We're like running less than $10,000 a month.
And that's the majority. Like 8 to 12K.
Yeah. And then I think coming out of that, like our next plateau was at like 30, but that came pretty quick, honestly. Like we went from that 10 to 12 to 30, like, probably under 2 years for sure. I mean, it was drastic, and that like changed everything. And then
it's usually the case. It's usually it's someone is hovering at that average, like I said, 8 to 12,000, let's call it 10, where they're just like, I don't get it. Like I try so hard, I put in the hours, I care as hard as I can. I feel like I'm giving everything that I can, but the math of your work or your systems or processes does not equal an outcome greater than the number, right? And once you make a couple of those fundamental adjustments, some of them being the way maybe that you're selling or your packages or that mixed with your attitude and your confidence in what you're doing, your belief system gets upgraded, your value internally gets upgraded, and then it doesn't take very long for you to get to, like you said, I mean, 200%. You're at 30,000 and now about double that. You know, I mean, you guys are crushing.
It's well, that was probably the catalyst with regard to, probably for the most part, moving forward from there, I can think like of very short stints of time before I would break my own belief about something. So it's just constant. I'm like, oh, this is all you can do there. And then it's like, nope, you can do way more than that. And every time I'm like, whether it's hiring coaches, whether it's revenue, whether it's like, sales in a month, whether it's everything, just like constantly proving myself wrong, which is great. But it pretty much started there. And then, because that was the genesis of Barbell Business, was it not? Or like the very front end?
Genesis.
Not the Genesis. Sorry, excuse me. Like that was like on the front end of it, correct? When we met?
So Barbell Business had a handful of episodes that had been started. This was before my time, and I came in and we had partnered. And I wasn't on the podcast for a few months or several months before. I started showing up on the podcast because I was building on the back end, and we were creating Barbell Logic and that whole platform. And then I came on, I did an episode with AJ Roberts. And then I just started getting invited on until I eventually ended up getting to take over the show and kind of that division of the company, if you will.
And then how many gyms would you say you've worked with in your, two questions. What has it been, about 10 years you've been in the kind of like working with gyms roughly or more?
No, the 13.
Okay. So almost before. I was trying to remember this the other day. Somebody brought this topic up. Who was the he was largely like a karate studio guy.
Mm-hmm.
And he was, I cannot remember the name of the business, but it was probably the first mentoring business on the block in CrossFit.
I it's funny. It's bringing back a vague memory. I don't remember who it was. If someone were to say it,
I know I
lose
would
my
remember
mind.
it.
But I haven't thought about that.
No, I was going to say John Briggs. That's John. It's not John Briggs. That's InsideTracker. It was John something. Oh, it's going to bug me. I can't remember. But that was another weird one where like you got in there, but it like you'd have a phone call, and then so when people ask me, they're like, "What have you done?" I'm like, "I've literally taste tested everything in the CrossFit space." I'm like, I'll try that. But that was one of those ones where you get in there and it was like the secret sauce was always the next level. We're like, hey, I'll give it to you, but it's just like you got to pay a little bit more money, and it was just like this seems dirty. It's like I just can't remember, and it was anyway. But yeah, so I didn't think it was that long. And then in that time, how many gyms? I mean, well over 1,000.
Oh, geez. Oh, yeah. Somewhere between probably up to close to 2,000.
Yeah,
between 1,500 and 2,000, somewhere in there.
Yeah,
1,500 was the last time that I counted, and that was maybe 2 years ago.
Okay,
2.5 years ago.
Okay, and then so this and the reason I'm kind of asking that because it kind of leads into a little bit of the topic for today, which is one of the mistakes that people make closing the year out and then going into the next year. And so you've worked with a lot of gyms, and one of the things that I've continued to refine, but that I learned from you a long time ago was just the idea of being proactive and then really looking out as far as you can to try to reverse engineer everything so that you start hitting these wickets as you work through your calendar or your quarter or whatever, like whether it's revenue, whether it's events, whether it's training, something like that. And that's one of the major pillars of what we teach in Affiliate U is you can manufacture this stuff. Like it's not by accident. If there are some instances where gyms are crushing, and it has, in my personal opinion, has like geographical location. You have 8 million people around you, and it's like you could have 200 members by accident if you suck. For most people, that's not the case. But one of the things, so just question about that, like with regard to planning, what are one or two things that you've seen gyms just falter on over and over and over?
Well, I mean, that question I could probably answer 12 different ways, because I think that a lot of aspects of a gym's processes, experiences, moments, these are things that you can plan ahead of time for your client. So like the whole member journey and manufacturing. And when I say manufacturing, I don't mean that they're fake. I just mean that you make sure that they happen for everyone. Right? That you can list out all the moments you want your new member to experience in a certain period of time, say their first 6 months, their first year, and make sure that you have reminders or tasks or something to make sure that those different moments happen, right? So we can go down that whole rabbit hole. But I'd say more to speak to what you were just saying for this time of year. I think that people or gym owners so often stay in that reactive state, particularly this time of year, because for a lot of gyms, the new year, and whether it's right in January or February or March in some colder regions where people start to come back out and they start to see that bigger influx, some it's in springtime, doesn't matter. The first, call it half of the year for practically everyone, at least here in the US, is the busiest time. You have your biggest rush somewhere in there. And what happens is that that's usually following the hardest time of the year. Q3, especially Q4, for a lot of gyms, again, depends on where you're located and what you've been doing or not doing for that matter, tends to be the harder time of year. And so everyone just kind of goes into this like, oh, well, this time of year sucks. And they just kind of dial it down. And they're just kind of letting it happen. And then Christmas happens and it's like, oh, we got to get our New Year's offer ready. Let's update the website. Let's get ready. But that's way too little, way too late. And you had an opportunity to break your plateau and get your business to a completely different range. Like you said, it took 2 years to get you from 10K to 30K. So let's just say in a year, you could have doubled your business, right? So by that rationale, if I want to double my business, which if I'm going to plan out that year in advance at very least, I'm going to say, well, what are all the things that I can upgrade or need to upgrade in order to make that possible? Mm-hmm. And this is the time of year you should already be designing and assembling those components. Mm-hmm. And so I'd say, to give you a more succinct answer, it's a failure to prepare for that influx so that you can use it to actually get you past the hump, rather than, we kind of grow a little bit in the first half of the year, and by the time we get to the end of the year, it's a wash, where we lost about as many people as we gained. Maybe you got a little bit better, but it's not enough to keep you moving forward, or at very least to even keep up with regular inflation, let alone what's happening now.
Right. Yeah, and it's and there's two things there. One is, towards the end of the year, you brought up a good point, and we've kind of referenced this the show before, where people just kind of like let the fourth quarter happen, and it ends up being a double whammy, because number one, people are traveling, and you're going to get probably a higher than average hold cancellation just due to time of year, right? Even if you're doing all the right things, like, you're still going to get them. And then on top of that, most people choose to do nothing or less than they were doing before. So it's like, all right, we already know people are going to be going out the door, and then on top of that, we're going to engage them less. Well, that makes no sense whatsoever. It's just it's a compounding problem to something that you already know is coming. So it's like, a train's coming down the track, and instead of stepping on the track, I choose to like step towards the train, and I'm like, well, that seems unreasonable. Like, why would I do that? So, and then going into the other part of that year, thinking about, okay, why? Because this happened to me numerous times. Like, and just to prove my point, I don't know if November will be our best month of the year, but it'd be damn close. And then going into of this year, and then going into the following year, there's going to be this influx of, let's just call it cash. That's what it is. But it's an influx of opportunity is really what it is.
That's the right word. Yep.
And people are looking at that, and they're like, well, how is this opportunity coming? But what they haven't figured out is how to keep the opportunity. They're just like, all right, well, I'm going to take it. But it's just like, you have your hands full, and it's just like watching a toddler try to carry 8 things, and they end up with bringing you one. And you're like, well, there's a trail of you're just a walking yard sale walking over here, just dumping everything out the back end of what's happening. And if you can plan to not only take all of the opportunity that's coming with you, but keep what you currently have, well, then you show up with all the toys, and you're like, this is great. And that's one of the things that I think people just they turn off in the fourth quarter. I'm like, wrong. This is when you take the dial and you turn it up really hard with regard to planning and engagement and everything. It honestly should be one of the busier times of year for you as a gym owner.
That's exactly right. So it's all about. It's about maximizing that opportunity that's coming, right? And you do that by actually digging in for your fourth quarter and making that your most fun and most exciting time of the year, so that everyone is as juiced up about the gym and the community and the fun, and people that builds the momentum. I want to leverage all of that goodwill and excitement in December already. So you should already be in the middle of campaigns that are helping tee up your January.
Oh, that's what I've been telling everybody. I'm like, everybody and their grandmother is going to run New Year, New You, blah, 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 shitty idea campaign.
Starts in December
in
is
January.
When you're actually starting to capture.
Right. So you want to be ahead of that and have these conversations so that you're top of mind and have given them some sort of value, had some back and forth and all of that, so that you can maybe not only just take what's going to come organically, just via people wanting to get back into the gym, but by having all of these conversations beforehand, you can capture a bunch of other people. You can get people who left in the last 90 days to come back during that. Mm-hmm. I think realistically, if you were to take your average, you have a higher than average cancellation or hold in the fourth quarter, just based on that time of year, you could get 50% of those back if you just engaged in some way, shape, or form. They'll come back in January, if not more. We pulled in like 3 or 4 old clients just this month. It's the 15th. Just by like re-engaging, like, hey, I'll see you on Tuesday. Come in. They're like, I don't know. And I'm like, I'll see you on Tuesday. And they're like, all right, I'm coming. Right. So it's like, it wasn't hard. It was just like, just try something, Yeah.
And none of it's really hard. It's just a matter of doing the things consistently in the right order. right? Or doing them in the right order consistently. And that begins now. And it starts with the re-engagement. Then it begins and building goodwill, building excitement December through how your holiday events are structured, your communications internally, externally to those previous members, bringing people back in, reconnecting, then giving them an opportunity to bring their people in, and they have first access to things before other people do. Then you roll out your offer, in which case you should have restructured what it is you're offering, how you're bringing people in, what did we learn from last year. That's a never-ending game, by the way. You're like, oh, well, I just need to fix it once and I'm done. Wrong. You consistently measure, you build it in a way to where it's measurable, and therefore you can continue to refine it, because maybe it's not the system, maybe it's the delivery of the system that can be improved, right? Maybe it's the communication, and then you can just get into that last 20% of creating wow factor and whatever you want to do, the integration journey for the first 6 months, like we talked about earlier. Redialing all that stuff in. The time is now. Be building that now, so that when the opportunity comes, you can maximize the opportunity, because it will change your trajectory for the rest of the year. Instead of you growing by, say, let's just call it a 100-member gym grows by 15, 20 people in the first 3-4 months of the year. Now, instead of it being 15, 20, it's 25, 30. But now you do, and you're doing a better job by those people, right? Because you had you brought more people in, and now you're going to keep them longer. And we're going to leverage those referrals, and that's going to continue to build in retail sales and your special, your additional average client value builders. Everything is going to build from there. And next thing you know, you're coming into the tail end of the year and you're like, wow, I am significantly stronger and more stable than I was last year. Let me do this again even better. And that's the name of the game over and over. So just planning on reevaluating and then retooling any and everything that you can to continue ratcheting things up ahead of time. Stop reacting. Be proactive. It's about do it before it needs to be done.
Yeah, and that's one of the, so like we already set revenue goals for next year, like last month in October. So, because then, and I know this sounds a little, some people are like, have never done that before, oddly enough, but then that's not good enough. So then you have to go with like, what's the number? Like, okay, cool, here's what the number. Well, then you just reverse engineer the number. Like, what does that need to be January? So I can check in, and then I'll start putting things in place that would put me on the number. Instead of just saying, well, I need 30 more members. And the question is like, well, how are you going to do that? Like, what are you doing other than just sitting around hoping that somebody walks in your gym? And that started probably in September, August, like looking at the evaluating of the year thus far. What do we need to change? What's going well? What's going pretty well that we could make kick ass next year? Like, we just need some small tweaks to that, not like a full rehash of something that's like largely broken. Just talking about like refinement of some things. Like, this is going pretty damn well, but how can we squeeze 10% out of it? You know, it's just like the old, how do you grow a business by 30%? Well, I could do that one of 3 ways. I can either increase my prices, I can add more clients or customers to it, or I could add a service offering, right? And most people only look at one bucket. Like, well, I just need to increase my membership rate base by 30%. Well, that could be a lot depending on what you're looking at. Or you could say, well, what if I just did 10% out of each bucket? What if I could increase my total client base by 10%? What if I could raise my prices by 10%? And what if I could create a third source of revenue that was about 10% of my current revenue right now? Well, that's 30%. I don't know a gym or a business doing anything that wouldn't take 30% growth.
And that's easy to do in this business. 30% is easy.
Right.
If you do that,
if you have a plan.
If you try that and you execute even half well, what we see is usually way better than that in growth. Because it's about getting into that mindset. It's about getting everyone rallied and on the same page, being proactive and intentionally improving everything to improve the business as a whole. It's not, I need the members, I need more sales. It's holistic. It's how many more people are we going to keep? How much better are we going to do with staff? That's going to change how they show up and teach classes, which is in turn going to affect the clients, which is in turn going to affect the referrals and how much product. All the things affect all the things. So learning how to do that and being proactive about it alone will help you become a better business owner and put you into the winning percentile by default. Let alone then now it's just skill development. Let's just make everything better.
Well,
over
and
time.
well, and then we're talking about like 30%, 200%. Most gyms would be over the moon if they got 10 to 15%. If they just went from 10,000 to 11,500, that would allow them to sleep at night. And if you're talking about, $1,500, shit, that could be 2 personal training clients. That could be 5 memberships. We're not talking about astronomical numbers. This isn't Amazon where we're trying to go from, 200 billion to 300 billion. It's just like, we're talking about like pretty low hanging fruit here. And some of that is fixing your broken stuff. Some of it is refining things that just need to be polished. And some of it is just straight up new concepts or ideas that I have yet to implement because I don't know what I don't know. Which, that could be charging for your onboarding or adding a kids class or, putting in some training evolutions in throughout the year that would bring you $6,000 to $10,000 in revenue. Well, if you're doing $100,000 in revenue a year and you do 3 to 4 training evolutions that bring you $2,500, that's a significant add to the bottom line. That's 10% with no growth in the gym, just running some sort of workshop that you would charge for.
Right.
I mean, there's so many ways to do that. And then just being the other thing about this is if you start this in January, you basically miss the whole first quarter.
Yes. And again, you missed your biggest opportunity. You blew the momentum, the opportunity for momentum throughout the year, right? It's just about getting ahead of it and not just reacting to it and seeing how many people are we going to be able to sign up. It's all the things, right? Get the retention dial, get the referrals cooking, get all of it in order. And so that by the time you get to January, you are already showing up hot and ready to go with a client base that's ready to bring people in for whatever your offer is. You have a better system. It's more exciting. That's a reason to reinvite old people back in that weren't even ever members that had just checked. It's all the things.
So I was looking at the past 5 years the other day, and typically March is where we see like there's a pretty big spike over the last like 5 years. And what we'll end up doing is that it's not a big spike in March. That's basically a running start that culminates in March, which now for the most part creates basically our new trajectory for the year. So I look at it, I'm like, hey, listen, if I can have some bumps at the end of the year, that's great. But what I want massive momentum so that I can see that basically really stark boop in March. But that doesn't happen in the month of March. It's a result of November, December, January, February, at which point all these new members, all that revenue starts stacking on top of each other. I did bring a friend week. You have the open. I did a pre-sale and but all of that had to be planned 4 months ago in order to get them all in. Otherwise you miss them and you get behind and you're like, oh, well, we can't do that one because we were behind on this one. And then you're just flailing around. But if you want to have that in March and then you want to keep it in March because that now determines like, oh, this is now the new number that we operate at. And I can, by the way, I can predetermine. You'd be like, hey, I need a new coach. I'm like, well, you could start that search in January to basically know like what's the number. The number is going to be, we need to get to 18,000 or whatever it's going to be. And then I'm going to hire my new coach. Well, guess what? You should have also been searching for that new coach in January, February. So you can vet people. Somebody may need to move there. But as that trajectory moves up, I'm like, boom, those two things will align. I'll get a coach and that revenue. And now I've got more free time at which I can devote to more planning, more strategy, fixing the things that are broken, revising the plan, all that other stuff. But it should have happened in December, and everybody's has the wrong strategy at the end of the year, which is to do less. Like you should be doing more. I don't want to be doing all that building in January because you won't have the bandwidth for it, particularly if you're a one-man band. If you know you're going to have the new influx and you're dealing with all these new people, you have no bandwidth to start planning at that point. You're just surviving at that point, and it just feels a little better because the revenue is slightly up. Mm-hmm. So,
also real quick, just jumping in, was it John Hackelman? Is that the name?
No, John Hackelman was a UFC coach.
Okay.
Yeah, he had the pit. I believe it was the pit.
CrossFit.
Yeah.
Yeah, CrossFit. He trained Chuck Liddell and
Yeah.
a couple other people in there. No, it was oh man, it's gonna bug me now, but I'll remember it anyway. But yeah, I think that's a big mistake that I made a long time ago when it's just like, well, we're just gonna survive and we'll figure it out when we get there. But I think people, like most of the people that we work with, I started working on their 2022 plan last month. And they're like, oh, what are we going to do? And I'm like, well, we're going to figure it out right now. Like, and then the likelihood of you hitting that target, if you determine it right now, is exponentially higher than if you just get in there. You're like, well, I'd like to grow a little bit. I'm like, right. That's the old, like, write it down and it's 300% more likely to happen. Well, like, write it down and then plan it out. Like, how would you do that? What does my calendar need to look like? How many people do I need to bring in? What am I doing to bring those people in? How am I going to keep them? How do I beat my retention from last year? But if you just did some basic planning, like what would be the minimum planning that you would have somebody do, Marcus, if they were a complete shit show?
Minimum planning would be, I would start with number one, what am I going to do in the fourth quarter? What can I do in the fourth quarter to maximize retention and engagement with my community and build buzz about the gym, get them re-excited about the gym? Okay. That would be the first place I would start. Second, it would be, okay, what is my offer? How can I improve my offer and my client integration? So, and that includes your sales process. So what am I offering and how am I going to make the most of every person who reaches out, from getting I'm going to increase my attendance rate for my intro session, to my conversion rate at my intro session, to my first X amount of months of them joining and sticking around so that they stay. Because that's, as we preach so heavily in the program, it's about how many people you keep, right? Retention is the secret to this game, because it affects everything. And not just keeping them, but how do I keep them for as long as possible at the highest average client value possible, because they freaking love this place and they feel like they're part of something special. And then I would plan out what would be my events for the year. So what am I going to do for my members as far as like workshops, parties, etc.? And what are my other, like from my, if I'm going to do pre-sales, when am I going to do those? And when am I going to do any like paid events, or the specialty program cycles that you want to do? And laying all of those things on the table and organizing in a manner to where you can see, okay, well, if I'm going to do this here, well, then that means I can't do that at the same time, because that's going to not make any sense, because March is going to have like 9 things happening and we did nothing in February. So let me spread that out a little bit. And if I start that here, that means I got to actually start planning that over here, because last time we ran an event, we needed like 4 weeks to get it filled up instead of like the 1 week that I actually gave myself. So just get all of the bigger pieces that I just mentioned onto the table and start plugging them in, including when you would start planning and executing it to make sure it went great. So I would look at each individual item and say, if I want that workshop, what would be a win for that workshop? Okay, I would want 20 people to show up. Cool. 20 people to show up. What do I need to do to ensure that I get 20 people in? Right? Because now there's no pressure. It's not like, well, how do I get 20 people here next week? It's, well, if I can just do this right, I would send out an email a month in advance. Right. I would send a personal message to X amount of people from my member base who had done this kind of thing in the past. And I would just lay all those things out and say, well, given that, how much time would I actually need to execute that?
Right.
And that alone right there, just having a layered plan where I looked at my sales and integration, I looked at my events and all the things, and just laid it out proactively. We're not even talking about marketing campaigns yet. Just running the business better, and with the things that I just said, will yield an infinitely better response, or ROI for you as a gym owner, than just focusing on the outbound or my new Facebook ad strategy, because that affects all the things: your retention, your average client value, the quality of your day-to-day, how many people you're enrolling, conversions, all the things that enable all the rest.
Yeah.
And now you have the bandwidth to come up with creative marketing campaigns and to do your social media better and all the things in real time as you're doing it.
Yeah. I think this is such an overlooked piece of running any business, but specifically in the CrossFit space. And if you're listening to this, even if you don't have help, like you can do this yourself. But if you do want help, reach out to us. Like we just finished a full revamp of the course. It's infinitely better than it was, and it was pretty damn good as is, but this is the best thing out there now. And these are the things that we'll walk through, and it'll be easier to digest, easier to implement, easier for you to wrap your brain around, so that you can start planning all these things and not being stressed out about it, so that you can actually like being in your gym. So if you're interested, reach out, but that will be launching very soon. You'll know when it does. We'll let everybody know, but now's the time, right? Not in January, February. If that is the case, like you're behind the power curve, we can still fix it, but it's always better to be ahead. I don't want to be behind. It sucks to catch up in any race. I don't care what you're doing. So reach out to us.
What's one of the most common things that we hear from people once they get going in it? It's, man, why did I wait so long to start?
I wish I'd have done this.
What the hell was I waiting for?
Right.
It's like there's no perfect time other than now. And get ahead. And whenever you're listening to this, whether it's now in November, mid-November, or you're catching this episode in the middle of summertime, just start.
Just do it.
Start.
And if you have questions, hit us up, DM us, whatever. We're happy to have that conversation. But that's, again, we know that the rush is coming, not just for the year, but just as CrossFit grows. You're going to want to be prepared so that you can set yourself up for success. Starting a cash flow plan now means buying a building in 3 years from now. You don't want to be late on that one. So these are all the things you need to think about. So if you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel, go there. Doing some serious upgrades to all of the content there. All the podcast platforms, you can find us. Affiliate you, besthouroftheirday.com. Reach out. We're happy to have a discussion with you. Doesn't cost you anything, but these are the types of things we're going to help you out so you can actually enjoy being in your gym. Thanks for listening, guys, and we'll see you next time.
So you never miss an episode of the podcast, subscribe to our YouTube channel and on all major podcasting platforms at Best Hour of Their Day. Thank you so much for tuning in and for being a part of the best hour of our day. See you next time.